Hello and welcome to a new YouTube tutorial. In today's video, we want to show you how to create and update entries in a Peakboard Hub list. For this, I've prepared an example where we can process order steps and create new orders. We'll start in the Peakboard Designer, where we'll first create a visual layout for our applications. To do this, we define it. We set the theme of the application and then create a header with a logo, title, and the current time. We also create areas for the data to be displayed in our application. Here, we want to display the current orders, the completed orders, and the order to be updated. Next, we'll take care of the data from the Peakboard Hub. For this, I have already created a hub list that contains the columns order number for the order number and step 1 to step 3 complete time, which display the time when each step was completed. In our example, we assume that all 3 steps must be completed one after the other for each order. However, in reality, this can be adjusted as needed. We will now link this list in the Peakboard Designer. To do this, we create a new hub list data source, first give it a name, then select the appropriate list and load the data. We can see that all orders are displayed. However, for this data source, we only want to display the active orders. In this case, we can tell whether an order is completed by the following. The third and final step does not yet contain a timestamp. So we set up a filter that checks exactly that and only returns orders that do not yet have a value in the step 3 complete time column. After updating the data, we can see that only the active orders are returned. Next, we create a visual layout for the active orders. For this, I select a styled list, which I customize to display the order number as well as the times at which each step was completed. I also create a button which I place over all the controls. This button can later be used to select an order and process the steps. To do this, I create a variable into which the hub ID of the order to be processed is written. To filter this order, I also create a data flow with an appropriate filter that filters by the selected order ID. Now I can go back to my styled list and define in the button script that the variable I just created should be set and the data flow reloaded when an order is clicked. Next, I want to create the design that displays the selected order. For this, I set a value in my variable and load the data flow so I can work with real values. Then I create another stylist and add the order number as well as the individual steps. To mark a step as completed, I create a checkbox icon and define in the conditional formatting that the checkbox is filled if the value is present in the corresponding step complete time column of my hub list. To update the value in the hub list when the step is completed, I create a tabbed event for the icon. When this is clicked, the corresponding order should be updated. For this, I select the Publish to External System Peakboard Hub Set variable by row number building block and replace the ID 0 with my variable, into which we have written the hub ID of the order to be processed. At this point, it's important to mention that every new entry in a hub list receives an ID that is incremented by 1. However, this does not necessarily correspond to the index of the respective row. This is a common mistake when updating hub lists and should be avoided. If we pass the index from our data source or from the data flow is used. However, since we already filter for open orders when querying the data and then filter again for the selected order in the data flow, the index will necessarily differ from the ID. In the case of our data flow, for example, the index would always be 0. Since the value in the first row of a data source has the index 0. However, the ID is different, so special attention should be paid here. In addition to the ID, we then set the current time in the completed time of the corresponding step and update our hub data source. Then we repeat this process for all 3 steps, adjusting the time to be updated each time. In the preview, we can see that we can select and update an order. After we have updated the third step, the order disappears because it has been completed. To be able to create new orders, we first create a new data source. This should simply return the order number of the last order. Therefore, we sort in descending order and select only one row. Then we create a button that can be used to create the new order. Here, we select the Publish to External System, Peakboard Hub, Add New Row at End Building Block, and then construct the new order number from the letter A and the ID of the last order +1. After that, we update both our active order data source and the data source that returns the last ID of our orders. Now in the preview, we can create and process new orders. Lastly, we want to display the number of completed orders. To do this, we create another Hub List data source, give it a name, and this time select with SQL for the query. This gives us the ability to create SQL queries for our communication with the hub. The query should simply return a count of the values where there is an entry in the Step 3 completed time column, meaning orders that have already been completed. We then link this value to a text field in our application. Finally, we need to update the data source that returns the count of completed orders whenever the last step in an order is finished. To do this, we go to our styled list and add the corresponding building block to the tabbed event of the icon. After that, our application is complete. In the preview, we can see that we can create, update, and complete an order. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If so, feel free to give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about the application or suggestions for topics we could cover in our next video, feel free to write them in the comments.